The massive space station hung in the void like a jewel among the stars. Viridian Prime was neutral ground, a place where hundreds of alien species could meet without fear. Today, the station's great hall was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. They had come to discuss the newest problem facing their ancient civilization: humanity. Commander Jake Morrison stood near the back of the hall, trying not to feel small. His uniform was crisp and clean, but he knew it looked primitive compared to the elaborate clothing worn by some of the aliens around him. Next to him, Lisa Brennan adjusted her tablet, recording everything that happened. She was his diplomatic advisor, and she had warned him this meeting might not go well. The humans had been traveling between the stars for only 30 years. In that time, they had built colonies on 12 worlds and made friends with 15 different alien species. To Jake, this seemed like a good start. But apparently the older races saw things differently. An alien that looked like a 7-foot-tall lizard covered in red scales stepped forward. Jake recognized him from the briefing files. Ambassador Vrek represented the Krelthian Empire, a warrior race that had conquered hundreds of worlds over thousands of years. When Vrek spoke, his voice was deep and threatening. "The humans are expanding too quickly," Vrek said. His yellow eyes swept across the hall. "They claim 12 worlds already. They make alliances with everyone they meet. If we do not stop them now, they will become a threat we cannot control." Jake felt his stomach tighten. Lisa touched his arm gently, a silent reminder to stay calm. They had expected criticism, but Vrek was talking about more than just diplomatic complaints. He was talking about war. "I propose that the Council authorize a military response," Vrek continued. "A strike against their colonies would show them their place in the galactic order. They must learn to follow the rules that have kept peace for millennia." Several species in the hall nodded their agreement. Jake watched as his hopes for peaceful cooperation began to crumble. Humanity had worked so hard to reach the stars, and now they faced extinction before they had truly begun. Then something unexpected happened. A section of the hall that had been dark suddenly glowed with soft blue light. Every alien in the room turned to look. Even Vrek stepped back, his aggressive posture suddenly uncertain. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and slender, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer. Its eyes were large and completely black, like pools of endless space. The being moved with grace that made it seem like it was floating rather than walking. "The Valari," Lisa whispered. "I thought they never attended these meetings." Elder Zinn approached the center of the hall. The Valari were legends, a race so old that they had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years. They never interfered in galactic politics. They simply watched and recorded. For one of them to speak at the council was unprecedented. "I must address this council," Elder Zinn said. His voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the massive hall. "I must speak about humanity and the grave mistake you are about to make." Vrek looked annoyed. "With respect, Elder, the Valari have not participated in council affairs for over 10,000 years. Why break your silence now for these primitive creatures?" Elder Zinn turned his dark eyes toward Vrek. "Because my people have been studying humanity for 300 of their years. We have watched them closely. We have learned things about them that you need to know before you make your decision." The hall went completely silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He wanted to know what the Valari had learned, but he was also afraid of the answer. "The Valari have a classification system," Elder Zinn continued. "We use it to predict how species will behave when faced with existential threats. Most species are rational. When they face certain destruction, they surrender. They choose survival over pride. Some species are resistant. They fight hard, but eventually they accept defeat when the cost becomes too high." Elder Zinn paused, and Jake saw something in the ancient alien's expression that looked like concern. "Humanity is different. They are what we call a relentless species. In all of our recorded history, spanning millions of years and thousands of civilizations, we have only encountered 2 other species with this classification." "What does that mean?" asked a small, furry alien from the front row. "It means they do not know how to surrender," Elder Zinn said. "It means that when you threaten their existence, they will fight with everything they have. They will sacrifice anything and everything to survive. They will turn every resource into a weapon. They will accept casualties that would break any other species, and they will not stop until either they are victorious or they are extinct." Vrek laughed, but it sounded forced. "You are afraid of them? They have primitive weapons and a handful of colonies. The Krelthian Empire has 6,000 warships and controls 300 systems. How could they possibly threaten us? Elder Zin turned to face the Krelthian ambassador directly. Because you do not understand what you are facing. We have studied human history. They have been fighting wars against each other for their entire existence. They have weapons that can destroy their own planet, yet they continue to survive. They have faced extinction events, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have ended any other species. And yet they persist. The elder's voice grew more intense. They tell stories to their children about warriors who fought to the last man. They celebrate battles where small forces held back armies. They honor those who sacrifice themselves for others. This is not just their culture. This is what they are. Elder Zin looked around the hall, making sure everyone was listening. I come before this council to give you a warning. If you attack humanity, you will start a war that you cannot win, not because they are stronger than you, not because they have better technology, but because they will never stop fighting. They will turn your conquered worlds into battlegrounds. They will make every victory cost you more than you can afford. They will fight you in space, on planets, in cities, in tunnels underground, and they will do it for generations if necessary. The hall erupted in debate. Some species dismissed the warning. Others looked worried. Freck shook his head in disgust. This is fear talking, Freck said. The Valari are an old dying race. They see threats everywhere. I do not accept this warning. The Krelthian Empire will teach these humans their place. We will strike their colonies and show them that they are not special. Elder Zin looked at Rek with something that might have been pity. Then I have one final warning for you, Ambassador. One that you should remember when your empire begins to fall. The Elder's voice rang out clear and final. Attack the humans and you will never escape. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The way Elder Zin said those words made them sound less like a warning and more like a prophecy. Around the hall, aliens were arguing loudly. Some wanted to help humanity. Others agreed with Rek that the humans needed to be controlled. Lisa pulled out her communicator. We need to send word back to Earth immediately. We need to prepare for war. Jake nodded, but he kept his eyes on Elder Zin. The ancient alien was leaving the hall, fading back into the shadows. Before he disappeared completely, he glanced at Jake. Their eyes met for just a moment, and Jake saw something in that gaze. It was not just concern. It was certainty. Elder Zin knew exactly what was about to happen. The council continued to argue, but Jake knew the decision had already been made. Freck and the Krelthians would not listen. They would attack. And when they did, humanity would show the galaxy exactly what Elder Zin had tried to warn them about. As Jake and Lisa left the hall to send their urgent message home, he thought about his own species. Humans had always been survivors. They had climbed to the top of their world's food chain despite being weaker than most predators. They had built civilizations in deserts, on frozen tundra, and on tiny islands. They had split the atom and walked on their moon. They had reached for the stars even when it seemed impossible. Now they would have to fight for their right to exist among those stars. And if Elder Zin was right about humanity being relentless, the galaxy was about to learn a very hard lesson about what happened when you threatened human survival. The warning had been given. Soon it would be tested. The colony of New Hope orbited a yellow star at the edge of human space. 3 million people called it home. They were farmers, miners, teachers, and engineers building a new life far from Earth. Today, their peaceful existence was about to end. Captain Ryan Cooper stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiance, staring at his tactical display with growing horror. 200 Krelthian warships had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. His small patrol ship was designed to chase pirates and defend against asteroids, not fight a full military fleet. Next to him, his first officer went pale. Sir, we have 2 other patrol ships in the system, the Vigilant and the Aurora. That's all we have, she said quietly. Ryan nodded. 3 small ships against 200 massive warships. The math was simple and brutal. They were going to die, but that did not mean they would make it easy for the enemy. Contact the colony. Tell Administrator Hayes to start evacuating civilians to the underground shelters immediately. Then get me Captains Ford and Martinez on the line. Down on New Hope's surface, Julie Hayes received the warning and felt her blood turn to ice. She had known this might happen ever since Jake Morrison sent word from Viridian Prime. But knowing about danger and facing it were 2 very different things. She grabbed her communicator and called her security chief, Greg Palmer. Greg, it's happening. The Krelthians are here. We need to start evacuations right now. Greg had been a soldier before he became a colonial security officer. He knew what war meant. I'll get everyone moving. How much time do we have? I don't know. Not enough. Julie activated the colony-wide alert system. Sirens began wailing across every settlement. People stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky, even though they could not see the enemy ships yet. They had been drilled for this moment. Families grabbed emergency bags and headed for the shelter entrances. In space, Ryan coordinated with the other two patrol ship captains. Captain Ford on the Vigilant was a veteran who had served in Earth's Navy before joining the colonial fleet. Captain Martinez on the Aurora was younger, but had a reputation for creative thinking. "Gentlemen, we all know we can't win this fight," Ryan said over the communication channel, "but we can buy time for the people on the ground. Every minute we delay them is another 100 families that reach the shelters." "I'm with you," Ford said immediately. Martinez agreed a moment later. A transmission came from the Krelthian fleet. War Leader Thax appeared on Ryan's screen. The alien looked exactly like Ambassador Rek, covered in red scales with yellow eyes that held no mercy. "Human vessel, you will surrender immediately. Your colony belongs to the Krelthian Empire now. Resistance will result in total destruction." Ryan felt anger burn through his fear. These aliens thought they could just take human worlds because they had bigger ships. They were about to learn differently. "War Leader, this is Captain Ryan Cooper of New Hope Defense Force. You can go straight to hell." He cut the transmission before Thax could respond and gave his orders. "All ships attack pattern Delta. Hit them hard and make them chase us into the asteroid field." The three small human ships accelerated toward the massive Krelthian fleet. To Thax, watching from his flagship, it looked like suicide. He was right, but he did not understand that humans were very good at making their deaths count for something. The Defiance fired its missiles at maximum range. The Krelthians easily shot them down, but that had not been the real attack. While their defensive systems were busy with the missiles, Ryan steered his ship directly at a Krelthian cruiser and fired his main cannon at point-blank range. The shot punched through the cruiser's shields and tore a hole in its hull. Atmosphere vented into space along with dozens of Krelthian crew members. The Vigilant and Aurora followed Ryan's lead, each targeting different ships. They were not trying to destroy the fleet. They were trying to make the Krelthians angry, to make them chase into the asteroid field where the big ships would be at a disadvantage. It worked. Thax ordered 20 ships to pursue and destroy the human vessels. The battle moved into the asteroid field, and the humans showed why they were dangerous. They knew every rock, every trajectory. They used the asteroids as cover and as weapons, shooting smaller rocks into enemy ships or hiding behind larger ones. Ryan's crew worked like a machine. His weapons officer fired continuously. His helmsman performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. His engineer kept the engines running far beyond their safe limits. Everyone knew they were going to die, so they made every second count. "Sir, message from Captain Ford," his communications officer said. "He's going to ram the enemy flagship." Ryan watched on his display as the Vigilant, its hull breached and engines failing, turned directly toward Thax's massive command ship. Ford accelerated to maximum speed and crashed into the flagship's engine section. The explosion was visible even from the planet's surface. Thax's ship did not explode, but it was badly damaged and had to retreat from the battle. "Ford just took out their command ship," Ryan said to his crew. "Let's make sure he didn't die for nothing." "Martinez, you thinking what I'm thinking?" "If you're thinking about using the mining charges, then yes," Martinez replied. The colony had stockpiled mining explosives for breaking up asteroids. Ryan and Martinez coordinated their remaining strength to lure 10 Krelthian ships into a section of the asteroid field that had been prepared for mining. When the ships were in position, Julie Hayes triggered the charges remotely from the surface. The explosions shattered dozens of asteroids, sending fragments flying in all directions like a shotgun blast. 3 Krelthian ships were destroyed immediately. 2 more were damaged so badly they had to withdraw. The remaining 5 finally destroyed the Defiance and the Aurora. But by then they had been in combat for 3 hours. On the surface, Julie had managed to evacuate 70% of the civilian population to the underground shelters before the Krelthian dropships began landing. Greg organized everyone who was left into defensive positions. Miners carried improvised explosives. Teachers clutched hunting rifles. Even teenagers took up positions with whatever weapons they could find. The Krelthians expected the humans to surrender when they saw the overwhelming force landing on their planet. Instead, the humans opened fire from every window, every rooftop, every doorway. The aliens had better armor and weapons, but the humans knew the terrain and fought with desperate fury. Greg had been in combat before, but this was different. These were not soldiers. They were ordinary people fighting for their homes and families. A woman who taught chemistry at the local school used her knowledge to create explosive traps. A farmer who had never fired a weapon before held a position in his barn for 6 hours against repeated attacks. A group of teenagers used their knowledge of the colony's maintenance tunnels to ambush Krelthian patrols. The Krelthians had expected to take the colony in a few hours. Instead, the battle dragged on for 3 days. They eventually captured the main settlements, but it cost them thousands of soldiers. And even after they claimed victory, they faced constant attacks from the resistance network that Julie and Greg had established. News of the battle at New Hope spread across human space faster than light. Every colony, every station, every ship received the same message. The Krelthians had attacked civilians. They had killed families. And 3 patrol ships had held off a fleet of 200 warships long enough to save most of the people on the ground. On Earth, Admiral Carl Hughes received his orders from the president. Mobilize everything. Build ships. Train soldiers. Prepare for total war. Within hours, recruitment centers were overwhelmed with volunteers. Shipyards that built cargo vessels received orders to start building warships. Mining operations across dozens of worlds shifted to producing weapons and armor. The last transmission from Captain Ryan Cooper before his ship exploded was recorded and broadcast across every human world. His words were simple but powerful. They think breaking one colony will make us surrender. They think we'll get scared and hide. Show them they're wrong. Show them what humans do when you threaten our families. Show them what happens when you make us angry. Julie Hayes stood in a hidden command center deep beneath New Hope's surface, coordinating resistance operations. The Krelthians controlled the surface, but she controlled everything below. Every day her people killed more enemy soldiers. Every night they sabotaged more equipment. The Krelthians had won the battle, but they were learning that occupying a human world was very different from conquering it. Greg brought her the latest casualty reports. They were losing people every day, but they were making the Krelthians pay dearly for every inch of ground they held. "How long can we keep this up?" Greg asked. Julie looked at the map of their tunnel network, at the positions of their resistance cells, at the faces of the people who had died defending their homes. "As long as it takes. They wanted our world. Now they're going to learn that they can't hold it. And when our fleet arrives, we're going to make them regret ever coming here." Far away, at the Valari observation station, Elder Zinn watched the reports from New Hope. His assistant, a younger Valari, looked confused. They lost the battle but continue to fight. Why do they not accept their defeat? Elder Zinn's expression was sad. Because they are what I said they were. President Nathan Scott stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the government complex. Around him, screens displayed information from every corner of human space. Colony populations, military resources, industrial capacity, volunteer numbers. The numbers were staggering and they kept growing. "Mr. President, we have 17 million new volunteers in the last 24 hours, his military advisor said. "The recruitment centers can't process them fast enough." Nathan nodded slowly. He had been president for 3 years, elected on a platform of peaceful expansion and scientific exploration. Now he was a wartime leader, and he felt the weight of every human life depending on his decisions. "What about ship production?" "Every major shipyard has retooled for military construction. We're building vessels at 3 times our previous maximum capacity. The engineers say it's not sustainable, but we're doing it anyway." Nathan looked at the tactical display showing Krelthian territory. It was vast, covering hundreds of systems. The Krelthian Empire had existed for thousands of years. Humanity had been in space for 30. By every logical measure, they should surrender now and beg for mercy. But Nathan knew humans did not work that way. Neither did he. "Prepare my address to the galaxy. I want every species to hear this, not just our own people." 20 minutes later, Nathan stood before cameras that would broadcast his message to every corner of known space. He wore a simple suit, not a military uniform. He wanted the aliens to see him as a leader, not a warrior. But his words would be anything but peaceful. "My name is Nathan Scott. I am the President of Humanity. 3 days ago, The Krelthian Empire attacked our colony at New Hope. They killed civilians. They murdered families. They thought one attack would make us surrender. Nathan paused, letting his words sink in. They were wrong. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes hard. To the Krelthian Empire, I say this. There will be no negotiation. There will be no peace talks. There will be no surrender. You attacked our children. You destroyed our homes. We will find you and we will end you. Your empire will fall. Your military will be destroyed. And every species you have enslaved will be freed. Nathan let the silence stretch for a moment. To the other species of the galaxy, I say this. We came to the stars in peace. We offered friendship and trade. But we are also prepared for war. We have fought wars for our entire history. We know how to suffer. We know how to sacrifice. And we know how to win. Stand with us or stay out of our way, but do not think you can threaten us and escape the consequences. The broadcast ended. Around the galaxy, billions of beings watched and wondered if the humans were bluffing. The Krelthians dismissed it as empty threats. But some species, the ones who had studied human history, began to worry. Commander Jake Morrison returned to Earth and was immediately promoted to Admiral. He was given command of the Retribution Fleet, a force being assembled from every available ship. His second in command was Captain Helen Cruz, a tactical genius who had spent years studying alien warfare. We need to hit them hard and fast, Helen said as they reviewed battle plans. The Krelthians expect us to defend our colonies and wait for them to come to us. We need to do the opposite. Take the fight to them, Jake agreed. What's our timeline? 4 months until the fleet is ready. We're building 500 new warships using every shortcut and corner-cutting method we can. Some of them probably won't last more than 1 or 2 battles, but they'll fight. 500 ships against an empire with 6,000. We're still outnumbered 12-1. Helen smiled grimly. Yes, but they'll be divided across their entire empire. We'll concentrate our forces and hit them where they're weak. And we have one advantage they don't expect. What's that? We're not fighting to conquer territory. We're fighting to destroy their ability to make war. We don't need to hold their worlds. We just need to wreck their shipyards, military bases, and supply lines. We'll hit them and move on before reinforcements arrive. While the military prepared, Lisa Brennan worked on another front. She had returned to Earth and was coordinating with sympathetic alien species to gather intelligence. Many species secretly hated the Krelthian Empire but had been too afraid to resist. Now they saw an opportunity. A Fenari diplomat named Kix met with Lisa in a secure location. The Fenari were small, furry aliens who had been conquered by the Krelthians 2 centuries ago. My people want to help, Kix said. We can provide information about Krelthian military installations. We can sabotage their supply chains. But we need to know that humanity will actually win this war. Lisa looked at the small alien with complete confidence. We'll win. The question isn't if. The question is how much we have to destroy to make them stop. Kix studied her face and saw no doubt there. Your species is frightening. You know that? Good, Lisa said. Fear might save lives. If our enemies are afraid enough, maybe they'll surrender before we have to kill them all. The intelligence Kix provided was invaluable. Lisa learned that the Krelthians had never fought a total war. Every species they had conquered had surrendered when faced with overwhelming force. They had a large military, but it was designed for intimidation and quick strikes, not sustained combat against a determined enemy. Meanwhile, human hackers launched a psychological warfare campaign. They infiltrated Krelthian communication networks and flooded them with images from human history. Pictures of ancient warriors making last stands, stories of resistance fighters in occupied territories, videos of soldiers fighting against impossible odds and winning. The message was clear. Humans had been fighting hopeless battles for thousands of years, and they had a disturbing tendency to win them anyway. On New Hope, Julie Hayes and Greg Palmer continued their resistance campaign. The Krelthians had sent more troops to occupy the colony, but that only gave the resistance more targets. Every day brought new attacks. Supply convoys ambushed, communication towers destroyed, isolated patrols that vanished without a trace. The Krelthian commander on the ground sent increasingly desperate reports back to his superiors. He had lost 3,000 soldiers occupying a colony that was supposed to be pacified. He needed more troops, but the Empire was reluctant to commit more resources to one small world. Julie read the intercepted messages and smiled. They're stretched thin. They thought they could take our worlds and we'd just accept it. They're learning that humans don't work that way. Greg brought her a report on their latest operation. A team of teenagers had managed to blow up a Krelthian fuel depot using improvised explosives and sheer courage. We lost 2 kids in that attack. Katie and Ben. They were both 17. Julie felt the familiar pain of loss. So many dead. So many families destroyed. But she could not let herself break, not yet. Make sure their families know they were heroes. Make sure everyone knows. At the Galactic Council, Elder Zinn called another emergency meeting. This time, even Ambassador Rek looked concerned. The Council had received President Scott's message, and some species were openly discussing withdrawing their support for the Krelthian Empire. I warned you, Elder Zinn said to the assembled representatives. I told you that attacking humanity would be a mistake. Now you see the first signs of what is coming. Rek stood up angrily. They have built some ships and made some threats. This does not frighten the Krelthian Empire. We will crush them. Elder Zinn turned his ancient eyes on Rek. You still do not understand. Let me show you something. The Elder activated a holographic display that showed graphs and calculations. My people have been running projections. Based on human industrial capacity, willingness to sacrifice, and adaptability, we calculate they have a 73% chance of achieving total victory over your empire. The hall erupted in disbelief. Freck laughed, but it sounded forced. Impossible. We have thousands of years of military tradition. We have conquered hundreds of worlds. These humans are children compared to us. You have conquered species that surrendered when faced with superior force, Elder Zinn replied. You have never fought a species that refuses to quit. You destroyed one of their colonies, and instead of surrendering, they mobilized their entire civilization for war. Do you know how many humans have volunteered to fight you? Over 20 million in the first week. Do you know how many ships they are building? Hundreds. Using construction methods that ignore safety and sustainability because they care more about winning than about long-term consequences. Elder Zinn's voice grew softer, but more intense. You have awakened something terrible. Humanity spent millions of years clawing their way to the top of their planet's food chain. They spent thousands of years fighting wars against themselves. They developed weapons that could destroy their entire world, and they did not destroy themselves. They learned to survive. They learned to adapt. They learned to win. And now you have given them a common enemy. The Elder looked around the hall. I gave you a warning before the war started. Now I give you another warning. Stop this war now while you still can. Make peace with humanity before they arrive at your worlds with their fleets. Because once they start, they will not stop until your empire is nothing but dust and memory. Vrek turned and left the hall without responding. But other species were listening now. Some began quietly reaching out to human representatives, offering information and support. The Retribution fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Proxima system. 500 human warships faced 600 Krelthian vessels defending the massive military station. On paper, the Krelthians had the advantage. In reality, they were about to learn a very painful lesson. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Relentless, watching the tactical display light up with enemy contacts. Next to him, Captain Helen Cruz was already calculating attack vectors and weaknesses in the enemy formation. They're positioning defensively around the station, Helen said. They expect us to either retreat or engage in a traditional fleet battle. Then let's do neither, Jake replied. He opened the fleet-wide channel. All ships execute Delta formation. Strike wings, you know your targets. Remember your training. Remember New Hope. Make them pay for every human life they took. The human fleet split into multiple groups, each moving with precision that surprised the Krelthian commander watching from the station. War leader Thax had been promoted after the victory at New Hope, despite the heavy casualties. Now he faced the human response with growing unease. They fight like a school of fish, his tactical officer observed. No rigid formation. Each group acts independently but supports the others. Thax activated his communication system. All ships maintain position around the station. Do not break formation. Their numbers are fewer than ours. We will destroy them easily. But the humans did not fight the way the Krelthians expected. Instead of engaging in a direct battle, the smaller, faster human ships darted in and out of the Krelthian formation, targeting weapon systems and engines. They used missiles as distractions while their energy weapons struck at vulnerable points. On the Relentless, Lieutenant Chris Sanders piloted the massive ship with skill that bordered on reckless. He spun the ship to avoid incoming fire, accelerated through debris fields, and brought them alongside a Krelthian battleship before the enemy could react. The Relentless fired its main cannons at point-blank range, tearing through the battleship's armor. Target destroyed, the weapons officer reported. Moving to next target. But the Krelthians were learning quickly. They began to adapt to human tactics, using their superior numbers to trap and destroy human ships. The battle turned into a brutal slugging match that lasted for 18 hours. Ships exploded on both sides. The void filled with debris and the frozen bodies of those who had been fighting moments before. Jake watched his ship count drop. 50 ships lost, then 100, then 150. Each one represented hundreds of lives, friends, and comrades who had trusted him to lead them to victory. "Sir, we're taking heavy losses," Helen said quietly. "If we continue like this, we'll lose." Jake knew she was right. The battle was going badly. Then he remembered something from the intelligence reports Lisa had gathered. The Krelthians expected enemies to retreat when losses became too high. They thought there was a breaking point where any rational species would pull back and regroup. But humans were not always rational. "Send a message to all ships," Jake said. "No retreat. No surrender. Every ship fights until destroyed or until we win. Make every shot count." Helen looked at him for a moment, then nodded. She understood what he was doing. He was betting everything on the one advantage humans had, the willingness to sacrifice themselves for victory. The message went out and something changed in the battle. Human ships that had been fighting defensively suddenly became aggressive. Damaged vessels on the verge of destruction turned toward enemy ships and rammed them. Captains whose weapons were destroyed used their ships as weapons. Crews that had taken heavy casualties kept fighting with whatever they had left. A damaged human destroyer, the Fury, lost its main engines and most of its weapons. Its captain, a woman named Lisa Grant, ordered her remaining crew to evacuate in escape pods. Then she aimed her dying ship at a Krelthian command cruiser and fired her emergency thrusters, accelerating to maximum speed before impact. The explosion destroyed both ships but also disabled 2 other Krelthian vessels nearby. Thax watched from his command center with growing horror. The humans were not retreating. Ships that should surrender were attacking. Crews that should be trying to save themselves were sacrificing everything for one more kill. "They are insane," his tactical officer whispered. But Jake knew it was not insanity. It was calculation. Every human who died took Krelthians with them. And unlike the Krelthians, humanity had prepared for total war. More ships were being built back home. More volunteers were training. The humans could replace their losses. The question was whether the Krelthians could do the same. Then human engineers unveiled something that changed the battle completely. A weapon that should not exist yet. A directed electromagnetic pulse that could disable enemy ships without destroying them. The technology was experimental and dangerous. But humans had compressed decades of research into months by accepting risks that any other species would reject. The Relentless targeted a Krelthian battleship with the new weapon. The pulse hit and every system on the battleship went dark. The ship drifted helplessly while human forces concentrated fire on other targets. "It works," Helen said with grim satisfaction. "Deploy the EMP weapons on all equipped ships." 20 human vessels had been fitted with the experimental weapons. They spread through the battlefield, disabling enemy ships while their companions destroyed others. The Krelthian formation began to collapse. Thax realized he was losing. He ordered a general retreat, but it was too late. Human ships blocked the escape routes. They had studied the battlefield carefully and predicted where the enemy would try to run. The battle ended after 18 brutal hours. The Krelthian force was annihilated. Not a single enemy ship escaped. But the cost to humanity was terrible. 237 ships destroyed. Over 90,000 people dead. The victory was real, but it was soaked in blood. Jake broadcast a message to every Krelthian world, along with footage from the battle. His voice was calm, but his words were sharp as knives. "This is what awaits your fleets. This is what happens when you attack humanity. We will accept any cost to win. We will sacrifice anything necessary. Surrender now, or watch your empire burn." The message spread across the galaxy faster than light. Species that had been watching the war suddenly realized that the humans were serious. They were not just defending themselves. They were on the offensive, and they would not stop. On New Hope, Julie Hayes received word of the victory at Proxima Station. She immediately launched a coordinated uprising that she and Greg Palmer had been planning for months. They had used the time under occupation to organize, to prepare, and to position weapons and explosives throughout the colony. When they struck, they did so with overwhelming force. Resistance cells attacked every Krelthian position simultaneously. They had learned the enemy's patrol patterns, their communication frequencies, their supply routes. They hit everything at once. Greg led the assault on the main garrison. His force consisted of civilians who had become soldiers through necessity and hardship. They fought with a fury born of months of occupation and the memory of those who had died during the initial invasion. The battle for New Hope lasted 72 hours. The Krelthian garrison, already demoralized by constant resistance attacks and news of the defeat at Proxima Station, collapsed. Some soldiers surrendered. Others tried to fight to the last. A few managed to evacuate on their remaining ships. When it was over, Julie stood in the colony's main square looking at the damage. So many buildings destroyed, so many lives lost. But they had won. New Hope was free again. The Galactic Council watched these events with a mixture of awe and fear. Elder Zinn addressed them once more, and this time even Ambassador Vrek was present to hear his words. "I will now explain fully why I warned against attacking humanity," the Elder said. "The Valari have studied thousands of species over millions of years. We classify civilizations by how they respond to existential threats." Elder Zinn activated a display showing the classification system. Most species are rational. When facing certain destruction, they surrender to survive. Some are resistant. They fight hard but eventually accept defeat when the cost becomes unbearable. But a very few, are relentless. The Elder's voice grew more intense. Relentless species have a fundamental inability to accept defeat. They will suffer any cost, accept any casualty, commit any act if they believe survival requires it. In all of our recorded history, only 3 species have been classified as relentless. One destroyed itself in a war of mutual annihilation. Another achieved complete dominance of their region of space through total war. And now we have humanity. Elder Zinn turned to face Vrek directly. "You attacked their civilians. You killed their children. You thought one victory would make them surrender. Instead, you gave them a reason to never stop fighting. They will not negotiate. They will not compromise. They will destroy your empire completely, and they will do it because you made the fatal mistake of threatening their survival." Vrek's scales had lost some of their color. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that you cannot win. You can kill millions of humans and billions more will take their place. You can destroy their fleets and they will build new ones. You can occupy their worlds and they will make occupation impossible." The human fleet had grown to 800 ships. They struck deep into Krelthian territory like a blade aimed at the heart of the Empire. Admiral Jake Morrison led them on a campaign that military historians would study for generations. They did not try to hold territory. They simply destroyed everything military they found and moved on. Every Krelthian shipyard became rubble. Every naval base was reduced to debris. Every military installation was shattered. The humans appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating precision and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. It was warfare conducted with cold efficiency and burning anger. Captain Helen Cruz had developed a doctrine that other human commanders copied. Find the target, destroy the target, move to the next target. Never stop. Never slow down. Keep the enemy off balance and terrified of where you will strike next. On the bridge of the Relentless, Jake studied maps of Krelthian space. They had destroyed 47 military installations in 3 months. The Krelthians were trying to defend everywhere, which meant they defended nowhere effectively. "Next target is the shipyard complex at Drakkar," Helen said. "It's their second largest construction facility. If we take it out, we'll cut their ship production by 30%. "How heavily defended?" Jake asked. "Very. But intelligence from our alien allies suggests they're not expecting an attack there. They think we'll go after softer targets." Jake nodded. "Then Drakkar it is. Prepare the fleet." But the military campaign was only part of the war. Humanity had learned something important during their violent history. Weapons won battles, but propaganda won wars. They made sure every Krelthian citizen knew what was coming. Human hackers flooded Krelthian communication networks with messages, images of destroyed military bases, video of Krelthian ships exploding, recordings of survivors describing the battles, and always the same message: Your government attacked our civilians. Now you will face the consequences. Surrender and face justice, or fight and face extinction. The psychological warfare was devastating. Krelthian military morale began to crumble. Some units surrendered without fighting. Others fought desperately but without coordination. The Empire was fracturing under the pressure. Lisa Brennan worked tirelessly to coordinate with resistance movements across Krelthian space. Species that had been conquered decades or centuries ago saw their chance for freedom. They sabotaged supply lines, provided intelligence to human forces, and in some cases launched their own rebellions. A Fenari resistance group destroyed a major Krelthian communication hub. An insectoid species called the Thrix poisoned food supplies meant for Krelthian garrisons. Even the peaceful Helani, a species that had never fought a war, began hiding human special forces teams and providing them with information. On New Hope, Julie Hayes oversaw the rebuilding of her colony. The damage was extensive, but the people worked with determination born of survival. They erected a memorial to those who had died. The inscription was simple but powerful. They came to destroy us. They failed. We will never forget. Greg Palmer had become the colony's military commander, training new soldiers and preparing defenses in case the Krelthians tried to return. But he also made sure to preserve evidence of the occupation. Every crime, every atrocity, everything that had happened would be documented and remembered. "Why are you keeping such detailed records?" someone asked him. "Because when this war ends, the galaxy needs to know what happened here. They need to understand why we fought so hard, and they need to remember what happens when you attack humanity." The war continued for 14 months. Each month brought new victories and new casualties. The human public received daily updates on the battles, and the support never wavered. Every ship lost was replaced. Every soldier killed was honored. The entire human civilization had mobilized for total war, and they would not stop until they won. Finally, the Retribution fleet arrived at Krelthis Prime, the Krelthian homeworld. Jake looked at the planet on his view screen. Billions of Krelthians lived there. Most had nothing to do with the decision to attack New Hope. But their government had made that choice, and now they would all face the consequences. He broadcast one final message to the Krelthian government. "You have 24 hours to surrender unconditionally. Disarm your military, hand over your war criminals for trial, accept the dissolution of your empire and the freedom of every species you have conquered. If you refuse, we will demonstrate why Elder Zin warned you." War leader Thax, now supreme commander of all Krelthian forces, received the message in his war room. He had fought the humans for over a year. He had watched his empire crumble. He had seen battle after battle lost, but he could not accept surrender. "Every Krelthian will fight to the death," he broadcast to his people. "We will never surrender to these barbaric creatures. We will show them that the Krelthian Empire cannot be defeated." Jake received the refusal and felt no satisfaction. He had hoped they would surrender. He had hoped to avoid what came next. But he had learned that hope was not a strategy. "Prepare the stellar destabilizer," he ordered. The device was theoretical physics made real through human desperation and willingness to take risks. It caused a star to temporarily destabilize, creating solar storms of unprecedented power. Jake had no intention of destroying Krelthis Prime's sun, but he needed to show them he could. The human fleet activated the device. For 6 hours, Krelthis Prime experienced solar storms that disrupted every electronic system on the planet. The sky blazed with auroras visible even in daylight. Communications failed. Power grids collapsed. Transportation stopped. But no one died. When it was over, Jake broadcast again. "That was a demonstration. We can destroy your sun if we choose. We can end your entire system. But we are offering you one final chance. Surrender now, or face total extinction." The effect on the Krelthian population was immediate and devastating. They had been told that humans were weak, that victory was certain. Instead, they watched as an enemy they had expected to crush easily demonstrated the power to destroy their entire world. The Krelthian military staged a coup. Officers who had been watching their empire fall apart for months arrested Thax and the civilian leadership. They contacted Jake Morrison with an offer of unconditional surrender. Jake accepted, but the terms were harsh. The Krelthian Empire would be dissolved. Every conquered world would gain independence. Krelthian military forces would be reduced to system defense only. War criminals would face trial under a galactic tribunal, with humans having a major voice in the proceedings. The war ended after 14 months of brutal fighting. Humanity suffered 3 million military casualties and 1 million civilian deaths. The Krelthian Empire suffered 20 million military casualties and lost everything it had built over thousands of years. Dozens of species gained their freedom, but the cost in human lives weighed heavily on Jake Morrison. He attended memorial services across human space, meeting with families who had lost loved ones. Each conversation reminded him that victory had required enormous sacrifice. 6 months after the war ended, Jake attended a ceremony at New Hope. The colony had been rebuilt, stronger than before. Julie Hayes greeted him warmly, but he could see the scars the war had left on her spirit. "We survived," she said simply. "That's what matters." "At what cost?" Jake asked. "At whatever cost was necessary. They attacked us. They killed our people. We did what we had to do to survive. That's what humans do." Elder Zinn made a rare trip to Earth to meet with President Nathan Scott. The ancient Valari and the human leader sat in a quiet room, discussing the war and its implications. "You tried to warn them," Nathan said. "They didn't listen." "Fear and arrogance blinded them," Elder Zinn replied. "They thought their size and age made them invincible. They forgot that survival is not about size or age. It is about adaptability and will. What happens now? Will other species fear us too much? Will they attack us before we become too powerful?" Elder Zinn was quiet for a moment. "Some will fear you. Some will respect you. Some will seek alliance with you. But all will remember what happened to the Krelthian Empire. You have sent a message to every species in the galaxy. Humanity can be a friend or an enemy, but it cannot be conquered." Nathan looked out the window at the city beyond. "We didn't want this. We came to the stars in peace." "I know," the elder said gently, "but peace is not always possible. Sometimes survival requires war. The question now is what kind of civilization you will become. Will you use your power wisely, or will you become what you fought against?" "I don't know," Nathan admitted. "We're just trying to survive and protect our people." "That is how all great civilizations begin," Elder Zinn said. "What matters is how they continue." Jake Morrison stood on an observation deck of a space station that served as a hub for human and alien cooperation. Lisa Brennan joined him, and they watched ships moving through space. Human vessels, Krelthian refugees, Fenari traders, species that had been enemies now learning to coexist. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Lisa asked. Jake considered the question carefully. "I think we did what we had to do. They attacked us. We defended ourselves. We made sure they could never attack us again. Whether that was right or wrong, I'll leave for historians to decide. The galaxy is different now. We changed it. We showed them what happens when you threaten human."